I really want to say as well how proud I am to see the Uganda flag. It's not normally rolled out for academics. You know, it's the sports people, the politicians, and everything for whom the flag is rolled out. And so I'm really very happy and proud that it could be rolled out for me. So that's, thank you. Thank you for really all the thoughtfulness that has gone into the preparation and planning of this event. We've had a lot of speaking and discussion around ICT, or technology for learning. We've also talked about including and excluding, or who are excluded by our use of technology. So in my presentation today, I'll be focusing particularly on the gender aspects of how we are including, or how we may be including or excluding some people. And so at the end of the day, what we do want is that those two chairs by the side of the laptop should be filled, but by who? And how do we take care that indeed we make sure that they are both men and women filling those chairs? All right, so just a little bit about me. I wear kind of like two hats. I'm actually a senior lecturer, and thank you for the promotion, Paul. I'm listed as a professor. I'm still working towards that. But I didn't complain, except when I had to, apply for my visa. Then I did write to Paul and say, please, I need to give a letter from my head of department, so it needs to be in line with what you're writing in your visa letter. So he did have to change it back to simply doctor. Yeah, but anyhow, I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Makerere University in Uganda. And I specialize in telecoms and ICT, and I'm particularly passionate about the opportunity that wireless technology offers for us in Africa. My other hat is I'm very passionate as well about getting more women using technology, more women online. And so 13 years ago, I founded an organization, Women of Uganda Network, which focuses on the use of ICT by women and women organizations in Uganda. And in fact, I think more people know me for my work around WOUGNET than they do that I'm an electrical engineer. People find that surprising. But my work there and the mentoring that I received from the women's movement in Uganda, right from my undergrad days, is what has led me to my foray to appreciating the need to take into account a gender perspective as we try to roll out our technologies. Now, and as you're aware, we were supposed to think of 5 things that are not already on Google. And I think that has been the hardest part about this presentation, trying to think about that. Now, you all already know that I love South African music, but I think Google doesn't know that. I love to dance as well. Normally what would have happened though is that we would have had a practice session with my kids the night before, but since they were not here, they couldn't get embarrassed, so that's fine. I also love baking. To be honest, I don't have much time for it these days, but it's something that I love as well. I love farming, but there's something about me and plants. I mean, however much love I give them, so far, it hasn't, been reciprocated. So I'm still working on that, and I don't know, maybe it's because my parents were both in farming, and so maybe I have a bit of it that, I still want to do. So I'm working on that. So I think, Paul, 4 is good for now. Is it? Oh, okay, thank you so much. So we can get started. All right, so as I was thinking about this presentation, I thought, okay, we're talking academics. So academics like numbers. What's the status quo? What are we really dealing with? And here are some snippets of information that I found, specifically from the Broadband Commission report that was released in September this year. And that's really looking at what are the opportunities. Because if we're talking about distance learning, if we're talking about really since Wednesday at the start of the workshop, we've been talking about increasing the use of technology. So if we're planning to do that, for our intended audience, for our students, even for ourselves as the lecturers, what are the opportunities out there? And as you will see, globally, 21% less or fewer women will have access to a mobile phone than men. Okay, so that's one of those. In sub-Saharan Africa, right, the gap is even wider, right? So 50% less women have access to the mobile phone. And I'm using the mobile phone here because this is something which we think and we say is everywhere. So we're not even talking about the laptop, the tablet, and everything. We're just, for now, thinking about a basic mobile phone. But you can translate that to the other technologies, right? By 2015, it's expected that you will have to have some form of ICT skills, right, to get a really good job, or to get any job, really, that's decent, all right? And yes, we like to say that in the developing countries, this is a challenge, but even in the developed countries, all right, this is an issue that they're still grappling with, right? So when we think about this and we reflect on what we're trying to do, all right, so the question we need to ask ourselves is that what would then be a gender-sensitive approach, right, for the use of ICTs in education? Because we've seen the numbers. There are definitely gaps. So we cannot stand here and say, okay, we are doing this type of training and it's available for the students, because we know the students are what type of issues they have to face, okay? And so what I will try to do, I did a workshop on gender and we did go into some depth, but here it will be really a quick overview and trying to see what are some of the key terms around gender. And I don't know if you have it here in South Africa, but normally when there's a discussion around gender, they'll be like, okay, you bring the women. Yeah, but being a woman doesn't necessarily mean you know the theories of gender. And I should say this and give apologies to the gender experts in the room. I did say I'm an electrical engineer, and so my gender theories are fairly limited. They're more from my experience than from, you know, a deep analysis of the world of gender. So, but that's what we will go through, and then we'll look at some of the specific challenges in, you know, higher education and proposals for a way forward. Okay. So when we're looking at gender, what are the key things, key concepts we need to understand? What's sex, and that's who we are, right? And then what are the needs for women, and why women, right? Why am I zooming straight into women? Because we've seen that there is a gap, and women generally are at the short end of the stick, right? So, but that's not enough, because if we just focus on the case for women, there are also men in vulnerable positions. So we come back to looking at the issue of gender and then identify what are the gender issues, and these will be many. And then lastly, what will be our concerns? What is it that we are going to focus on? Because one has to really pick and choose your battles carefully. Okay, so just to start off with, sex is our biological definition of, you know, who is a man, who is a woman. Gender, on the other hand, is a social construct, a cultural construct of who you are as a man and who you are as a woman, okay? So the challenge with that then is, and I said in the workshop, the only time, okay, generally speaking, the only time you're truly a boy or you're truly a girl is just after you've been born, all right? After you've been born, your gender takes over. How? When you hear a friend has got a baby girl, what's the first color that comes to mind? Pink. And if it is a boy, blue. All right? So right there and then, okay, you are already being defined by society's expectation of what you should be as a boy and what you should be as a girl. And that's right at birth. Now, obviously, okay, thank you. Your sons would not mind wearing pink. Neither would your daughters mind wearing blue. But that is something that is being decided from them. So in essence, we're born male, we're born female. We learn to be girls, and we learn to be boys, all right? And girls and boys who then grow into men and women, okay? We learn how to do that, okay? And that's the whole part of gender. And this is why, all right, the expectations of what a man will do or what a woman will do will change from culture to culture, all right? But even over time. So as culture changes, so will the expectations change, all right? So back in the day, as my grandparents will tell us, women were not allowed to eat eggs, although they were the ones that prepared them, all right? But now they can eat them, okay? So it's just been a change over time that says, in fact, now I think we're even being encouraged to eat the eggs, you see, because science shows that that's healthy for us, you see? So, but they've still been women biologically over the time, but what is expected of them has changed over time, okay? So in essence, we are taught what we should be as men, as women, in our particular cultures, and it's why we have culture clashes, because then you have a mix. So our attitudes, our roles, our activities are things we learn to do because this is what is ascribed to us by our cultures and in the time that we have. And it will vary greatly, okay, from culture to culture. Okay, and so what does that mean? That means that, you know, I think some of you may have seen this picture before. It's a very, very busy picture of a lady in a rural setting, okay? So she, I'm sure, believes she's working very hard. And when we did have the workshop on Tuesday, I mean, multitasking came up as one of the roles for women in our communities. Yes, but do you see where the husband is? Can you see the husband in the picture? And this is not to be a male bashing session. Let me get that up front. So please, the men, we're together, okay? But do you see where he is? Can you see where he is? Right up there. All right? And what is he thinking? What is he thinking? And who comes back home at the end of the day and, oh, wow, I'm really tired today. I worked so hard today, okay? So this is something, I mean, it's a rural setting, it's not in it, but it sort of helps us to see, you know, how we perceive what the other side is doing, you see? And these are issues which we need to take, therefore, into account, all right? So having seen that picture then, right, what are the gender issues we then need to be concerned about? All right? And the gender issues would be from the differential treatment, from the difference in labor, in activities that men do and that women do, okay? And this will be a whole laundry list depending on where you come from, right? And one key point that I want to mention here is that gender does not mean women, okay? So if you're trying to identify gender issues, you're going to look at what is the daily, you know, what are the daily activities for the men, and what may be some issues arising out of their expectations because they're men, and then also looking at what are the daily activities for women, and what may be the gender issues arising out of their expectation because they are women, okay? So this is what we would be looking at, and so it's very important to understand that gender does not mean women, although often they're used interchangeably, but that is really not the thing. So once you have identified what the issues are, so for example, in our particular case, we're looking at the opportunity for online, distance learning, use of technology, or timing of your classes, all right? So we know what the gender issues are, all right? Then what are the gender gaps? Who is being disadvantaged by the approach you're taking to deliver a class, okay? Is it the males? Is it the females? Right? And through that is how you will then identify what the gender gap is. So these will be the differences, either in their attitudes towards the technology maybe, their interests, their activities. We had a program that was rolled out in Western Uganda. And so they had done their assessment, and they found that the girls, it was for primary school, the girls get up early in the morning, they have to go fetch firewood, they have to go fetch water, you know, basically do a lot of work in the morning so that they can bring these things, leave them behind for their mom who's going to be spending the day preparing stuff. The boys just went over to school. This was in a rural community. And so those were the issues around, you know, education at that point. So the program decided to give breakfast to the girls because it was like by the time they come to school, there's really no time between all the work they had to do early in the morning and having a decent breakfast for school. Fair enough, okay? But because they were looking at their program for a gender perspective, they also kept monitoring what was happening with the boys. Now, if your rural areas are like what we have in Uganda, you'll know that even if the boys were having breakfast, it really wasn't what you would say is suitable, to keep you up for school, okay? So that was the first issue. The second issue was, trying to explain to a primary school boy why the girls are getting breakfast at school and the boys are not getting breakfast. It's not easy. I'm sure even for yourself, some of you in here, okay, I'm glad to see very men because that's something. But normally when there's like, a gender workshop, that's for the women. Yeah, so imagine trying to explain to primary school kids why this was happening. So in fact, they noticed a decline in the performance of the boys because they felt, well, maybe school is not for us because we're not being treated well or not being treated the way the girls are being treated. So the boys were not seeing all these tasks the girls were seeing. No, theirs was an immediate problem that they are not being served breakfast. They are probably maybe not as, they're less hungry than the girls, but they were still hungry. So the program had to be redesigned to actually provide breakfast for everybody. Okay? Yeah, so this is why it's important that when you have your gender issues, you're always looking at what is the situation for men and what's the situation for women so that you don't solve one problem and create a problem on the other side. Okay, so in the case of academics again, so suppose we say now we've identified that women in general will tend to be the ones at the short end of that. So what are their needs, but what are their gender concerns around it? Because the needs will be immediate things you can do, all right? In the example I just gave, if you give the girls breakfast, that's just what you've done. You've not stopped the fact that they have to wake up early, go fetch water, go collect firewood and everything. So you are giving them breakfast, but maybe they're still coming to school tired. You're addressing an immediate need, but it's not a strategic program that you're providing for them that is holistic. But even that is good enough as a start. So what would be some of the women needs you could support, right? So for example, I don't know if you have, I think that I asked about that and I was told you don't really have like student housing, okay? Yeah, but if you did, maybe you would prioritize having student housing for the women, maybe because it's, school is far off, you don't want them walking out late at night or things like that. So you may do that. You may have, for the student population that's here, you may want to have daycare centers, for example, So those would be some specific needs you could address. It's not going to change everything else out there about what they have to do, but it's going to make their life easier, all right? On the other hand, you may choose to look at the gender concerns and see, okay, fine, what are their daily activities and how could you prepare them better for class? Right? So in the illustration I used, okay, yes, you do have to get the firewood, you do have to get the water, but maybe constructing boreholes, right? So that you're actually bringing water closer to the communities. They still have to fetch the water, but even now it's close enough, maybe the women could do it themselves, or, because it's close enough, maybe the boys could also participate in that activity, or things like that. Or you could introduce biogas or things like that that make go green, to use what Paul has to say. You could do that. And when you address the gender concerns, in general, you will be changing something about the community as opposed to the women's needs where you're addressing a specific thing. The daycare center maybe will be frequented more by the women than the men because we do have single parents that are male as well. So with respect to academic achievement, what do we see? In general, we do see that a school dropout rate for many countries is higher for females than it is for males, okay? We also know that generally in terms of literacy rates, men are more literate than women. Okay, so if we're looking at gender and we're looking at ICT for education, what does that mean? It means that even as we're doing all these programs, making all these programs available, If women are dropping out at a higher rate than men, it means that they are therefore not attaining the type of academic qualifications that open them up for better paying jobs. You see? So it's a systemic problem that we would then need to try and address. So that would be on the dropout rates. On the literacy rates, everything that we've been talking about today, most of our information, and I don't know what it is in South Africa, but for us, English is the official language in Uganda, and so most of the materials will be accessible in English. So even if we looked at literacy just in English alone, okay, how available is that information to the men and the women in the communities we're trying to reach out to, right? Even if we brought it down to another level of literacy in your local language, we would still have issues around that, okay? So we would look, one at the factors as what are impacting academic achievement, and then see what is the implication because of the gender gap that we have identified. So once we have done that, what do we need to do? As we said, providing housing, involving more women in decision-making, availing training, women training in new areas so that, yes, you may have dropped out, but there are alternative paths for you that you could follow. We used to have a very strict rule back at home, like up to secondary school. If for some reason the girls got pregnant, that was it. That was the end of schooling for them. It doesn't need to be, right? It doesn't need to be. So you can provide training in other areas. But that would be, again, addressing very specific needs. On a more broader level, in terms of gender concerns, how are you addressing, what is your legal environment, what is the academic policy around the elimination of sexual discrimination? So we both can get to rise to the potential we have, irrespective of whether we're male or female, all right? You may have to put into place some mechanisms. So for example, I've seen some scholarship opportunities or fellowship opportunities where they have an age limit. And then they'll say for males, it's 40, for women, it's 45. And they're doing that because the expectation is that women may have had to take time out, you know, to take care of the family or things like that. So you may put in measures such as those, except you have to be careful that you're not creating a problem over on the other side. You may also have mentoring programs that bring more women up into decision making, because you don't want to have a woman there just as a token woman who is not qualified, who's not capable to be there, but she can be mentored through the system in order to do that. You may also decide to have more scholarship opportunities that enable more women to be at the point where you can then pick them out for these various opportunities. Now with scholarships, that's also another tricky thing that you have to, may have to balance. Because I shared this as well on the workshop we had on Tuesday. My head of department is always coming into my office with all these things that, you know, oh, there's this 4-month program in MIT, and that's really big for us as engineering, you know, MIT in the US. You know, 4 months here, 2 months there, and everything. And I share an office with a female co-worker, and we always give him the same response. It's like, 4 months, what will we do with the family, all right? So there are some scholarships which, you know, will cater, you know, maybe especially if you have children that are 2 years or below, or things like that, they may be able to facilitate you to undertake such opportunities, but it's not always the case. All right, so we've seen basically some of the considerations that you would have to make in general around gender. Now let's look more specifically into science and technology, gender and science and technology. And being academicians, and I've seen it through all the presentations I've had the privilege to attend since being here, we need a framework, you know, in terms of how we peg our work, how we pin our work. And for this, what I'm using is the Gender Equity in Science and Technology, or the GEST framework, in terms of discussing what we could be doing more around getting more women and men, especially vulnerable men, using the technology. So basically, GEST envisions a transformed science and technology environment in which the technology is specifically looking out for the needs of the poor, okay? And also including marginalized groups and women. Because often what you find, and I have to keep telling this to my students, is that As engineers, we're very excited about technology, and we can come up with all kinds of things, but we need to worry about the other part of it, our users, all right? How affordable will these products be once we roll them out? So services will be there. You can walk in a shop and buy it, but how many people actually will be able to walk in and buy it? So we need to keep that in the back of our minds, that yes, we'll have technology out there, but we need to look at, yes, there will be some high-end technology, but there should be middle-end and low-end technology so that everyone can be served by the technology. And we should also be looking at technology. Yes, we do get excited about it. You know, the bells go off, the whistles go off and everything, and that's really exciting. But we need to see our technology, our engineering in the bigger picture, all right? How it fits with human rights, how it fits with social development, all right? Now this, when I'm telling my students, this is not what they're expecting to hear from me, because they're expecting us to drill down into the equations. And I'm like, yes, that is great, but our technology is going to be used by people. So we need to make sure we are conscious about the people that are using it. And therefore, a just approach, if you're conscious about a just approach, what would that lead to? We need improvement in women's education, all right, in technology, both as designers of the technology, but also as users, okay? Because oftentimes when you find out why are people not using the technology, it's I don't have the skills to use it, even when they have access to it. You know, I don't know how to use it, I'm afraid to use it and everything. So that's one part as users, but we also need women as designers. So we need more women engineers, more women technicians, and maybe in communities like here, it may not be such a big deal, but in communities where men and women cannot freely mix, maybe because of religion or culture, then you have a challenge. Because if we have, even if we set up a public access point, a telecenter, all right, who is going to manage the place? Right? So if you don't have any females that are able to guide the women to use that public access point, then you might as well shut it down. Yeah, because they cannot be in a space where there are men that are not their relatives, you see. So it's very important that we look at that. We also need to look at fair treatment for men and women. And I think for me, this is a key thing that I always want to put out when we're talking about gender. Gender is not women. Gender is looking at fair treatment for both men and women. And we're looking really at a society that values men and values women for what they do. Remember the picture we had at the beginning, and where someone is thinking, my wife is not working, and you know, I'm the only one that's working. No, we're all working. We may be doing different work, but we should get rewarded or valued for what we're doing and how we're contributing to this. All right? And so if you're taking that approach, then essentially what you're looking for is gender equity. Okay, so I may choose to be a homemaker for that matter, right? But that should not make me any less of a human being. That should not make me any less of the dignity I deserve for what I'm doing compared to you who is going out, you know, driving out in the morning and spending the whole day at an office desk or anything like that. We're both contributing to the success, for example, of our home, if this is a family. And so that basically the rewards, right? The rewards accruing to us should be the same, right? And we know that even in the workplace, okay, let alone I've given the example between a homemaker and the one that goes out, even in the workplace, this is a challenge, all right? It's not uncommon to hear of two people, same title, same job description, but one is getting a bit more than the other. Why is that happening, okay? What is it that is causing the disparity in the remuneration, and yet really we are doing the same? Okay, so we need to be mindful about that. Okay, and why is it important that we do that? Again, looking at the framework, you have your 6 parameters there. One is for social and economic justice. We're looking for fair treatment, we're looking for a fair world, right? For women's rights, okay, so we have a right-based approach as well, even though we're talking about technology. For empowerment, okay, because we have different needs, and those needs should be met. We should not have to change our lives because we have to use the technology. Rather, the technology should suit what we're doing. Because if we have to change our lives in order to use the technology, that is one less attraction to using the technology, okay? So we need to be mindful about that. Sustainability, okay? Because we have, as women, we have a lot of information, tacit information. How is that information shared? How is that information valued? I mean, I think the one area where we know it's very valued is in the areas of medicine, okay? Traditional medicine, I think this is usually in the hands of women or our grandmothers or things like that. But what I find also very interesting is who are the most important chefs that you know of globally? Are they male or are they female? They're men, isn't it? Yeah, so once it is high profile, it's, you know, you're known all over the world, or then cooking is something, isn't it? Yeah, but if it's at your home and your everyday thing, then cooking is nothing. But it's still all cooking, all right? And I'm sure there's some ladies who can rival these chefs, but they're not going to get that kind of respect that these chefs do. But it's quite interesting that they will get the glory about this. Participation is very important. If you're running your classes, okay, and you're only getting the male voices, you're not getting the true picture of what's happening in your classes. Participation is very important. Having a voice is very important. And lastly, connectivity. I think we're all about a networked world. We all have something we can share. We all have something we can contribute. So it's important that we bring, since technology is a really great way of doing this, it's important that we bring both men and women into this space so that we can have active sharing. Alongside this, there's an unconference follow-up that's happening that Paul and I were once active with, the DOT. There's the Digital Opportunity Trust. And one of the questions we've posed to the interns, these are people that are maybe 1 year or 2 years out of their undergrad. We're asking them, how does being on Twitter, how does being on Facebook, right, allow you to share about what you have? And I tell you, even the men or the boys, I don't know what they want to be called now, they're probably in that transition, you know, they've also admitted that Twitter and Facebook allows them to be who they are. You see, allows them to say what they can say without worrying of, okay, this person is older than me, therefore I can only say so much or anything. You see, so connectivity is very, very important. Okay, so I just thought I had so many wordy things, and I know that's one of my weaknesses. But some statistics to share with you. Women researchers in science. This is from UNESCO. We're the minority, we know that, but you know, the numbers, especially for academics, we want to see the numbers, all right? In Africa, women research in science, 34%, okay? So we still have some ways to go, right? We're there, which is good, and for many countries, having 30% women is the target. So we are, one would say, above average, if you put it in that context, all right? And the graph over here shows what's happening at a country-by-country level. So from this, we can see Tunisia, it's just about to get the 50% mark. I had to be politically correct, so I've put South Africa in there. You're not doing too badly. Guess which is the country in between Tunisia and South Africa? Of course, Uganda. So we're there, we're not doing too badly, but you know, we have quite a ways to go if we look at it at a continent perspective. And since you're doing open distance learning, all right, a number of you either fully or you know, a huge percentage of these numbers matter to you because it means that your audience is not only the South African audience, all right? You have or you're targeting students across the continent and beyond, not just South Africa. Okay, so we've seen that there's a gender gap, all right? We've discussed it from primary level, we've seen it all the way up to the research levels. So what do we need to do? And here comes another big term in gender mainstreaming, okay? And it's quite interesting now, a lot of policies, ICT policies or every policies, we're going to do gender mainstreaming. Okay, and that's where you see it, and that's where it ends, okay? It is assumed that something is going to happen with that. If you're lucky, it may be a section in a whole report of 20 pages plus. But really, what is this? Gender mainstreaming brings a gender perspective, meaning that everything that your organization or your institution does always starts with the question, what are the challenges, what are the issues, what are the gaps from a gender perspective? And then works to address that, okay? So, especially in higher education, all right, we need, if you're taking a gender mainstreaming approach, we need to recognize that, in fact, ICT, all right, involves diverse processes or your students' interaction with you, which are affected by gender. Okay, so that's the first thing. So we saw the statistics earlier. If you're doing something that requires a mobile platform, we saw what the numbers are like. You see? So yes, you have the technology out there, you can use the technology for your programs, but there's going to be a gender influence on what is happening around that. Also, because of our outreach, okay, and I had really big numbers in terms of your student population or your outreach here, for example, just at UNISA alone where I asked about it. So in fact, we do have an opportunity to contribute, to promote a gender equitable society. Because if we reach out to our students, if all our processes, okay, are conscious about it, what are our students going to learn from us? They're going to learn to be gender conscious as well. Because these are the things, we're still in their formative years, these are the things that will have an impact on them. That, you know, the way the programs are run, this is something that is consciously taken into account. And therefore, we do have a role we can play in promoting the development of gender equitable societies. Okay? Also, we have also that opportunity to develop mechanisms because we are the ones designing the programs. We are the ones developing the curriculum. Okay? So through that, we can ensure that, in fact, the technology we're putting out there, the opportunities we're putting out there are actually responsive to the gender climate in which we find ourselves in. Right? So it may vary from one country to another, but we do have that opportunity to bear that, okay? And so taking all that into account, okay, means that whatever we do as institutions would therefore be with the foundation of a gender-sensitive approach, okay? So this will include everything from what are the policies for the university, what are admission policies. For example, at Makerere University, we have an admission policy that says that the girls will be given 1.5 points extra, you know, from the cutoff mark. Now, there's been a lot of debate about that, you know, saying, well, so does that mean that the girls come in when they're not good enough or things like that? No, but if you've done your admission process, you know that there are so many people who will be around the cutoff point. And, you know, one thing could have happened. They could have gone either side, okay? So adding 1 mark to a requirement which has maybe 45 points required to get into that class, and you give someone 1 mark, it means that instead of looking at 45, you know, you're looking at 44. That person is still good enough, right, for your course that you're looking at. But I should say there's also the other side, because sometimes the girls do get teased. You're the 1.5ers, you know? So it's made to look like you were given 100 extra points to come in. But really, if you look at it in terms of the numbers, yes, it gives you an edge, but not so much. You will not get into the program if you really couldn't make it into the program. But that's just something that you can do as a policy, okay? What are your priorities around research and development? What issues do you worry about, okay? So, and here I'm going to be maybe politically incorrect, but I'm flying out tomorrow, so even if I get deported, that will be okay. When we're coming to South Africa, the first thing we're told is about violence, especially for the girls. All right, be careful, don't walk out at night and everything. So that's what we're told. We're also told it's a great country, so, you know, that will cover me by the immigration people. But anyhow, so are we doing enough research to understand the causes of sexual violence, all right? Would that be something which your universities or your institutions allow, okay, to happen? Yeah, because we can actually be gender insensitive, if I may use the word, by the priorities that we define, okay? So, and I think I saw that in one of the posters out there, which said that the men's ideas for research proposals, you know, kind of sail through. But the women's ideas for research proposals, it's not automatic. Why? Okay, why is that? So this is another thing we need to be conscious about. Your budgets. You may be gender sensitive all you like, but if you do not budget for it, that is it. Yeah, it will be on paper, and you may be invited all over the world to speak about your, you know, your approach to integrating gender, but that's basically it. It's an approach with nothing on the ground because there's no budget. And you will find that indeed when you try to take a gender approach, you may need to spend more. Okay, so for example, we said of setting up a daycare center. I did find that you have one here already, but if your assessment, turned out that you did need one, you would have to invest in that, you see? So you need a budget for that. Your HR, your community engagement, and all these. So really, in all the processes you can think of for a university setting, you would need to apply a gender lens as you discuss it. And so essentially what we're saying is that gender mainstreaming is a process. It's not a one-off thing that you do and say, aha, I'm done, okay? And why is it not a one-off? One of the biggest things it's not a one-off is because we said it's a social, cultural construct, which changes over time. So it's something you're going to have to be reviewing and doing all the time. So it's not a process, it makes your concerns and issues, you keep identifying them, and it's an integral part of what you do, all right? And it also calls for the implications of not taking a gender approach. Because I've been in discussions, especially around technology, which says, no, the problem is, let's roll it out, people will come. And I'm sure you have some ICT projects in particular where that approach has been taken. There's no service in this area, let's just put up the internet cafe or telecenters or whatever it is that you call them. Let's put them out, people will come. Yeah, you may have challenges with that and you will be surprised. So it's like, yes, you're addressing one problem, but because you've not looked at it holistically. And here again, there's another example I use from Uganda. In the northeastern part, we have a very pastoralist community. So indeed, if you identify an internet cafe as this space where even your students can go have access and everything, you're going to have a challenge because the men in that community may spend 3-4 days out pasture, right? Tending to the cattle, and it's a fairly dry area, so they do need to move, quite a ways. Yeah, so then what will happen to your telecenter? Right? There may be women in there, yes, but there will be no men, and you will be surprised that there are no men. But you did not take a gender approach in terms of designing that. So it's very, very important that you look into that. And so therefore, basically, what I highlight at the bottom of this is that you may choose to ignore gender mainstreaming, true, but it's at a risk, okay? And that's at a risk of widening inequalities, and technology has a very good way of increasing inequalities. So for the women that are in here, we talked of we saw the picture. If you had to fetch firewood and do all those things, imagine how much time that takes away from you, right? But now, right, you have the dishwasher, you have the laundry machine, you have all these things, time-saving devices, okay? So the more we ignore the impact that technology can have in terms of improving our lives, the bigger the gaps that we make them, okay? So, looking at the universities, what are some of the challenges that we know are in place? One is near exclusion or limited participation of women, minorities, and all. Two, reluctance of men, to participate in gender workshops and everything. And I should say I'm really happy to see a healthy participation of men in this room. And then also the development of science and technology for our schools. If you look at the text, for example, in secondary schools, okay, when they're giving examples of the engineering or the technology-oriented exercises, who is normally put in as an example? It will be maybe John did this, all right, or he did that. Now, if you go through a textbook from beginning to end, and all the examples, all the illustrations, he did this, or John did this, or George did that, what message are you getting? Okay, you're getting the message that, well, this is a man's world, all right? That's what you're getting. And if it's a medical book and it's maybe about nursing and all the examples are Susan did this or she did this, and what message are you getting? That nursing is not for men, you see? And I don't know what it's like in South Africa, but I know in Uganda, we do have male nurses, but people always stop and look at them a second time, you see? People always stop and look at them a second. But that's because we've been conditioned, to think that men can't be nurses. And some of them can be very good nurses. Okay? All right. Also, at tertiary, we have very few women in leadership. Okay? So when you look up the chain, you don't see people like you. okay? Now, it is true, and even with engineering, I keep saying this, we cannot expect to have more girls coming into engineering if we are not doing more at the grassroots, at the primary levels, at the secondary levels, to get more girls interested in sciences and therefore taking the necessary courses to end up in engineering. So looking at the problem at engineering, at the School of Engineering, is not enough. You need to look down. So yes, maybe the pool of women to pick out, your leadership, maybe it's limited. So what can you do, to groom women into roles of leadership, okay? When we come in, like I've been at the university all my life as a teaching assistant and everything right after school, okay? So what programs are then put in place to allow me to take time out to have my family, which I did, and I have 3 lovely kids, but at the same time, keep me in the loop, right? Give me administrative experience. Now, don't favor me. I'm not looking for favors because I believe I'm very capable, right? Yes, but I am also a mother, and I love being a mother. So what can be done around that so that we continue to increase the opportunities so that we don't have this problem, okay? There's also an absence of women in science and technology, both as lecturers and as students. Now, as lecturers, that's also a problem because if you're not used to seeing women dealing with technology, when you walk into a classroom as the students and they find a female there, what's their first expectation? Uh-oh, we're going to have problems in this class, all right? This should have been taught by a man. And believe you me, the women will be equally, the female students will be as equally scared as the male students, you see, because it's not our expectation that that's what we should have. And Paul, I do want to thank you for this. I mean, Granny and Lauria's presentations, top-notch. All right? Really top-notch. And they're female, and they know what they're talking about. And in fact, they left us with the impression that given more time, they could speak and, give even more detail, more depth. So it is not true that women cannot be experts in this field, but we need to see that happen. We need to see more of this, okay? So that even among ourselves, we can build the confidence that, indeed, I can also be one of them. I can aspire to be one of them. But indeed, in the workshop that we had on Tuesday, what we found, so it's also here, is that normally when a woman excels, you stop being a woman in the eyes of the community, right? Yeah, they'll say, wow, that was just like a man, isn't it? Yeah. Now, so in fact, what has happened, everything about you is woman, except people are now seeing a man instead of seeing you, you see? So that's also something we need to be aware of. And in fact, when they tell you that you are being a man or that's like a man, it's really meant as a compliment. I mean, it's hard to explain, but in fact, it's being said to you as a compliment. Yeah. Now, of course, as a woman, now you have 2 choices. Recognize the compliment and kind of leave it at that. Sulk and get really, really angry and leave this person wondering what they said wrong because they haven't. Otherwise, if they were conscious about it, they would not have said it. And so they've given you a compliment and there you are sulking. You see, so it's kind of a difficult position. But we need to address this so that, in fact, when you achieve as a woman, you're recognized as a woman and you're not translated into something else you don't want to be. Yeah, and I try and I very rarely wear trousers and things like that, but I can tell you that doesn't quite help. So, if you love trousers and you're female, keep wearing them. I've tried that, it doesn't quite work. But anyhow, and I think also, which is very, very important, is that we give technology a cold stature, okay? We don't actually realize that, in fact, your use of technology, your comfort with technology, there's a gender dimension to it. So we take for granted that it's okay that the boys will zoom in to the technology, all right? Yes, but the girls can also zoom into the technology if they were encouraged, if they were promoted to do that. And I find also myself, I'm guilty of this as well but when I go home, I become really, really woman. So I don't change the light bulbs, and I think as an electrical engineer, I would be first choice in terms of who should be changing the light bulbs, but that's the men's role. So you see, even ourselves, I mean, as much as I'm out here and I'm the one giving you this presentation, because this is so much a part of who we are, it's something you have to be conscious about all the time. And so it's okay to sort of slip back and forth. It happens. But hopefully more and more we will become more and more gender conscious. Because of course, then when I stop and think about it, I'm like, okay, so what message am I giving to my son? I'm like, well, light bulbs are changed by men. So it means that there are certain roles which are ascribed to women just as much as I'm ascribing changing of light bulbs to men, you see? So even ourselves, even as much as you may consider yourself to be an expert in this, we do have challenges around this. Okay, so what do we therefore need to do? Number one, all right? Number one, and I'm glad we have some leaders here for your institution. We need to do whatever it is we can to change the gender climate of our institutions. And you can do this at many levels. You can do it as an individual, all right? Just being conscious about what you do as you interact with your students, okay? If you're doing maths or anything with technology, are your expectations that the men will get it and the women will not? Okay? If that is, and that's okay, if that's what your expectation is, what are you going to do to ensure that the girls get it as well? Okay? It will be more work on your part because you need to assess this and find it out, but what are you going to do? All right? For those that are maybe head of department or dean of schools, okay, what processes can you put in place, right, to ensure that you're really trying to improve this? And I think one of the key things that came out of the workshop that we did on Tuesday was the issue of evaluations, okay, student evaluations. And what we understood then, and of course this is not scientific, we didn't do a study about it, but it would not be uncommon for the same subject being taught, by two people, for females to get a bit of a sterner, evaluation relative to the males, okay? Now, for the moms who are in here, who is normally in charge of discipline at home? Who's in charge of discipline? It's usually the mothers. Yes, and what do you think our students see when we stand up in front of class and we're telling them what to do? How different are you from their moms? How different are you? You see? So some of that, consciously or unconsciously, may in fact end up on your evaluation, all right? Whereas on the other side, and I will tell you this, my kids love going shopping with their dad. There are no rules about how many things you're allowed to buy and how expensive any of those things can be and all that. So, so I'm so-called the strict one, but here I think I'm putting a bit of discipline into the system. But if they were to evaluate us, I will tell you, my daughter, she prefers to do her math homework with my husband. Now, my husband is an administrator, and I'm an engineer. So, generally speaking, who should be better at math? Not that he doesn't know math. He does know math. But generally speaking, the expectation would be if you were told there's an administrator and there's an engineer, who should be your math teacher? And we were in a dark room, and you didn't know who was there. 9 times out of 10, you're going to pick the engineer because you would expect that they know math, you see? So, but this is, it's true, we have all these theories out there, but we have to remember that at the end of the day, we are dealing with human beings, okay? So, what are some of the strategies in terms of generating a gender climate? Training, okay? Training and supporting staff, both in terms of their gender sensitivity and being aware of what's going on, but also in terms of the technologies and the processes that we expect them to take on board. Like I said, many times, a woman will be invited onto the board, for example, and it said she's being brought on to bring a gender perspective. Yeah, no, but you do need to have training. Just by being a woman, that does not necessarily mean that you're gender aware or gender sensitive. You need to be trained to be able to identify the issues and the gaps within your specialty. Okay? So it's not automatic that just because you're female that you would be able to do that. Okay? We also need to increase the interest and appreciation of the link between gender and technology. Okay? And that it's not just a question of roll out the national backbone and roll out the ICT policies and roll out all these things. Okay? So we need to appreciate the gender dimension to this. Okay? We also need to have leadership on board. Okay? We need to have leadership on board because there's so much you can do as an individual. But if you have the buy-in of your head of department or the dean, or better yet, your vice chancellors pushing the gender change in your environment, then you really have it, okay? You also need a gender policy, okay? So that actually you have written down, you've laid out what is going to be your approach to gender mainstreaming, okay, at your institution. And as you have this policy and as you implement it, you need to consider a gender audit, okay? And these gender audits need to be regular. So it's not a one-time thing and, oh, we've got our baseline and that's it. No, you need to keep doing it, okay? Remember the example about the porridge that I gave? Yeah, something may look like a great idea at the start of it, but if you don't continuously audit and monitor what's happening, you may actually find that you've caused, you know, a negative on the other side, which was an unintended side effect of what you're doing. So you may want to look at your enrollment numbers, you may want to look at your management numbers, okay, so that you're not surprised when you're putting out a call for women leaders that they're not there. You indeed can do that, okay? And one of the tools that I just want to introduce on this is the gender evaluation methodology for internet and ICTs. It's been developed by APC. And it's a good tool, even if you don't have a gender background, all right? It provides a very nice step-by-step process through which you can actually do a gender assessment of your institution. And if you go to their website that I've provided there, they actually have done different guides now for, you know, your telecenters and different types of environments. So it's a tool for a beginner that I would greatly recommend you take up in terms of beginning your journey on gender mainstreaming. So in conclusion, gender is key, okay? Gender is key in terms of development, gender is key in terms of our education. It's something that is a social construct, therefore it will vary from place to place and vary over time, all right? Having said that, the use of ICT, the use of technology today is paramount in education, okay? That's how we're going to reach out to the student population that is yearning for this. And just down there is a picture of one of the youth camps that we've done, reaching out to youth in terms of getting them on board with gender and ICT. And so I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to working with you all so that we fill up those chairs.
Thanks, Dorothy. Thank you. Before we take questions for Dorothy, I would like her to share two things that she shared with us. Her running a workshop in northern Uganda in the community, introducing females to ICT and how the men sit and where the women sit, and how she approached that. And secondly, she was just awarded the African Digital Woman of the Year Award. And how the men in Uganda responded to that.
Thank you. I'll start with the second one because that's easy. It's been announced, and in fact, I understand yesterday it was actually put in the leading newspaper, the leading daily. So of course there were a lot of emails and SMSs that I received yesterday. So I'm yet to find out how they reacted. But one of my family members that I spoke to yesterday is getting me a he-goat. He was very clear about that. That would be a he-goat, so that's one of the reactions. But I said I don't like goat meat, so maybe get, you know, something else, beef, chicken, or something. But, you know, so when I go back home is when I actually get to celebrate this. But it's been such a humbling moment, that award. There were 4 of us shortlisted, and, you know, all really great women doing work in the area of women and ICTs from West Africa and everywhere. So. To have been selected for this it's something I'm still trying to internalize. Let me just put it that way. In terms of the work that he's referring to, my approach to gender is to try and start from an individual and let's work towards that. And basically, I always look, what is the main thing that I'm trying to deliver? So in this workshop, we were trying to train a rural community in northern Uganda on the use of mobile phones to reach out to extension workers because it's a farming community. And so we're doing basic things like the use of SMS. This is in 2005, so phones were still a big deal at that time. So it's the use of SMS, placing your voice, making your voice calls. We also provided each of the women's groups with a radio cassette player because we had weekly radio programs as well to reach out to them. Now, the challenge with the timing for the women in rural areas in particular is, what is the best time? Is it morning, but they're doing all these activities? Is it afternoon? Is it evening? Or is it night? Night, they're going to bed, you see? So we got them radio cassettes, so even if they missed a particular show, we recorded all the shows on, on a tape that they were then provided with, so they could do this. So we had one condition for this project, that the phone and the radio cassette had to be kept by a female member of the group. They were all women, but it meant that even when they took it back home, they had to be the ones to keep it. And out of the 12 groups that we were working with, only 2 failed. I mean, one, the phone was kept by the husband, and another, the phone was kept by the son. But that was it. Now, in addition to giving them the technology, face-to-face, and I think it's also come out in this workshop, face-to-face is very important. You need that. So we do have community meetings, to get them together to discuss and interact. Now, in this community, if there's a community meeting, the women sit down and the men sit on the chairs. And I've got a lot of flack around that because when we do the community meetings, the women do come with their mats. And the community meetings are actually targeted at them, right? So, but we allowed them to sit on their mats and to have the men seated on the chairs. So if someone came in or someone looked at the picture, they would actually think that the meeting was for the men and the women just happened to be around. But our take on it is that, yes, we could have made the women to sit on the chairs, and they did bring the chairs themselves. But what would happen? Right? Would they be listening to what we're trying to tell them, or would they spend the whole, 1-hour session so uncomfortable about how we had got them to sit, you see? And this is early days. We're introducing a technology that didn't have. So for the men as well, I mean, would they want to listen to what they're saying? Would they think that we're trying to make, change the power relations in their community, and that's why we're bringing this project in? So these are some of the issues that we had to deal with. And so in the end, we said, okay, we will not change the sitting arrangement. We will allow people to sit how they feel comfortable. Only condition we put is that the equipment had to be kept by the women. But I said 2 groups still failed to do that. But 2 out of 12 is not too bad. Thank you.